Okay, so this is the third video out of 3 showing how to create and render a turntable turnaround of your 3D models. So I have After Effects open, and we're going to use this to put our PNG sequence together that we created. So I have After Effects, and so if you're unfamiliar with After Effects, we have the project window here, so we're going to import our files into this window, new compositions here. This is our timeline where we can create and layer files, and then preview, look for the preview tab for where you can kind of test out your render. So first thing I want to do is bring in my assets. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and File. And let's see here, I've been working off of my very messy desktop, and let's see, we're doing the character model demo. And so it should be set up so your image sequence should have come in through into the images file. And remember, we created a PNG sequence with 4-frame padding. So the 4-frame padding is really important so that numerically things show up in order like this. So I chose to do a 72 image sequence. And so I just click on the very first PNG, and then it should automatically show up where PNG sequence gets highlighted. If it's not highlighted, turn that on and press open. And you can see that brings it in as one single PNG sequence. And we can see right here that it's set up at 1920 by 1080 at 30 frames per second. And so it just depends. Think to yourself, do you want this to be 24 frames per second, or do you want it to be 30 frames per second? I think I'm going to prefer 24 frames per second, so I'm going to go ahead and set this up. So if you want this to be 24 frames per second, you'll want to do this. But we also want this to loop, right? We animated a 360 frame animation. And so I'm just going to, and there's a chance that there's, sorry, I had to think for a second because I know there might be one issue coming up. So we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Sorry. So anyway, I have this. I'm going to change it to 24 frames per second. So I'm going to click on the footage, go down to Interpret Footage, click on that, and I'll go ahead and change this to 24 frames per second. And then I'll set this to loop, I don't know, what do you think, like 3 times? And I'll press OK. So from here, I'll create a new composition. So you can create a new composition by clicking on this button, or you can go up to Composition and New Composition at the top. So right here, I'm going to just click on the very first preset, so 1920 by 1080 at 24 frames per second. If you chose 30, you might want to go down to this one. And so 24 frames per second. The duration right now is set to be 7 seconds long. So these two numbers are frames. This is seconds. This is minutes. This is hours. So if I want this to be 6 seconds, what I recommend doing is just clicking right there, pressing delete once and pressing 6 like that. And right now my background color is set to be like a green screen green. That doesn't really bother me, so I'll press OK. And it came in really tiny. So if you're navigating this, you can use your middle mouse to zoom in or out, or you can click on this tab and go to fit to screen. And so at this point, I should be able to just click on my PNG sequence and then drag it down and let go. And we have an animation. Let me just go ahead and press preview just to see where we are. I can see that there's some handle running off, so I need to make my composition a little longer. Okay, yeah, so my problem that I foresaw didn't really end up being a problem, so never mind on that. So let's see here. So the composition is 6 seconds long, and this PNG sequence is set to be 9 seconds long. You can see that right there. So if you ever want to change your composition settings, you can just go up to Composition, Composition Settings, change this from 6 to 9, and press OK. And now I can zoom out over here, or I can press plus or minus on my keyboard to zoom in and out of this. And that's set to exactly 9 seconds long. So now if I press preview, I got a nice little turntable that lasts 9 seconds long. We can see the model from all angles, and that's exactly what we want. So, and there's more we can do to this, right? So with this, I can go up to effects, and I can do color correction in this program. We can composite if you happen to have done like an ambient occlusion pass and a normal color pass, right? You can do a lot of compositing in here. But like a good example, something we could do is like color correction. And there's all types of stuff. You can do like brightness and contrast if you want to keep things simple. do not do these auto ones. Those are not any good. Just trust me. It's just avoid it. But we have like levels is one that I really like a whole lot. So like if I want to color correct the levels, essentially the way this works is I'm usually using this top bar, and so these are our mids, and this actually shows us a histogram of what how many grays are there. Blacks will show up over here, whites will show up here. So if I want the whites to kind of be pumped up, I actually take this white slider and kind of pump it in to kind of juice that up a little bit. You don't want to go too heavy on this though, because if you go too much, it starts to break up your image. You see how I'll lose detail, right? So I'm just doing like a subtle little punch it up a little bit. Maybe same with the blacks, as I can just kind of do that to punch that in. And then the midtones, I can grab on the midtones and I can do that to either lighten the midtones, or I can bring them this way to darken the midtones. And so, you know, I think subtlety is nice here. So, and something nice that's also nice about using effects in After Effects is you can toggle them on and off. They're non-destructive. So with this effect, I just turn it on, turn it off, and yeah, subtlety is key here. So there's all kinds of effects you can do. You know, we just want to do simple compositing to kind of have this, you know, look good. All right, so let's talk about rendering this. So something that's really important to do before rendering is right here, we're working at 8 bits. And I really like working in After Effects at 8 bits, but when it's time to render, it's time to push it up to 16. If you push it up to 16 bits while you're working, it might slow your computer down. So it's good to stay on 8 bits, but when it's time to render, just click on this, and on bit depth, just change this to 16 and press OK. So it's this right here, just change that to 16. And now we're ready to render out. So I can either go to composition, and I could add to the media encoder queue. And so I can send that to media encoder, and it kind of helps you spit out formats that are really, how do you say this, that are really specified towards YouTube or Vimeo, for instance. Or After Effects has kind of improved their internal render queue a bit. So I can also just go composition and add this composition to my render queue. So add to render queue. And under here, best settings is good. We can output. So I'm going to change the name of this, and I'm going to put this onto my very busy desktop. And I'll just call this render in all caps, so I'll be able to find it. And down here, I can change the format of the codec. And honestly, I think the default settings are pretty darn good. So we don't really need to mess with this too much. But it's an H264, which is great. And we can go in here and really kind of get in there and adjust it. But again, for this demo, I'm just going to leave them as it is, because the default setting is pretty solid. And so from here, I'll just press render, and we can see the blue bar going. And that is, hopefully that didn't blow your ears out. And that is the render right there. I'll pull it up, and we have a 9-second turntable render.